What is up, everyone? Volathis here, and you're probably clicking this video thinking, well, what are you talking about with the pre-thoughts of Final Fantasy XIV or Realm Reborn? The game's almost done here. Well, this is something that didn't occur to me till later. Obviously, if I had been thinking right, I would have made this video when I planned on it. And the time frame we're looking at here for these pre-thoughts of mine is I'm looking at the point of early access when it went live to the point about 2 weeks in. So that's roughly putting my character at level 20 roughly. Now, the other thing we're going to discuss here is I'm going to explain where my pre-thoughts are coming in a way, because I've been in the MMORPG world for a very long time. Now, I'm also not including beta because betas are betas. It's not exactly finished with the game. The game is roughly made. There's still minor tweaks, and I just don't like to think about a game with beta. Now, do I use it to gain interest in a game? Yes, I will, but I'm not going to forge my opinion in stone until I've tried it after live. So let's hop into my pre-thoughts. And of course, you can also check out my Who is Volathis video. It pretty much explains what I'm going to tell you now. But I'm going to tell you guys anyways, just so you know where my thoughts are coming from. I've been in the MMORPG world for a very long time. I would say my first MMORPG was RuneScape. And I was playing this back when dial-up was the only real option for internet. Can I tell you how old I was? I don't remember. Very long time ago. And I haven't touched RuneScape in years. And I know it's updated at least once. I don't know what version you would say it was, but I'm trying to give you a hint at here. Now, I've been playing those types of games for a while, and I played RuneScape for many years. I thought it was good at the time. That does change with time, of course, my opinion and everything, just like anyone. But fast forwarding a little bit, I didn't really, other than RuneScape, then World of Warcraft came out. And I've dedicated many years to World of Warcraft, and I've played it off and on. I've had periods where I've quit, but for the most part, I would say World of Warcraft has forged a big portion of my memory of how I feel about this genre, and I've been playing it for years. And I've played classes here and there. Typically in the MMORPG world, I usually do stick to a mage class, because through the years of gaming that I've done, those are the type of classes I like. I will admit, I do like playing a warrior or something like that, but for the most part, the one that is usually the most fun for me is a mage, and I will default to that first. So, I played WoW for many years. Yes, I've raided for many years. I've never really been a serious PvPer. I do play games that involves PvP sometimes, and I will PvP here and there. But most of my opinion will be forged around PvE content because I'm a raider. Now, I didn't become the type of raider that I am now when I started playing these type of games. I didn't get very serious, and usually I didn't see many in-game content. But I did develop into being the type of raider that I am now. I wouldn't say I'm a particular type. I like to think I have a hard mentality when it comes to scheduling for raids, because I'm a very schedule-oriented person. But when it comes to actual raiding, I just say give it the best you can and let's see if we down. Now, I didn't just play WoW all these years. I would say majority-wise, yes, I played WoW. But I've tried other MMORPGs, and I've tried a MMORPG called Aeon. I played that. I didn't really get to in-game content. Usually switching between these MMOs, I usually can't make it to in-game content because I usually end up going back to WoW. But I played that. I got, I want to say level 30. I thought it was a lot of fun and something different. And that's usually why I switch my games up and switch MMORPGs, because it's different, it's new, and it sounds interesting. And it's really hard to do that because usually when you switch all these games, you usually lose some friends a lot. Well, I wouldn't say I've lost friends because of it. I just don't end up playing with them because they don't want to play the same game as me, and I completely understand. I'm getting a little off track here. So let's fast forward a little bit. The next one after Aeon was really Rift, and I devoted a lot of time to that. Obviously not as much as WoW, but I took it very seriously, and my grades in college were not agreeing with that because of that. But the point of that is I sell a lot of in-game PvE, and I was being very competitive with the other faction on our server, and we were trying to beat them as much as we could to get to server first. We never really made it, but we were right behind them on everything, and that's the majority of where my opinions. I've also on this played Terra a little bit. I didn't really get that far in it. I thought it was a very interesting game. It just didn't work out for me. So that's a lot of what my pre-thoughts story is coming from, and I hope you understand where my opinion is. Yes, when I'm looking at MMORPGs, the first thing I'm going to look for is what is my in-game PvE content. And if I don't hear that they have raids planned, it usually makes me not want to play the game. And I also use WoW as a big reference. Now, am I going to say, oh, this game sucks, WoW is better? No, but I am going to use WoW as a comparison, and I am the type of person that understands that WoW is very old in the MMORPG world. And I understand that games that start out and may not have the features as well, I'm a little bit more forgiving to understand that, oh, WoW didn't have this for so many years. I'm not going to expect a game that just started to have those same features. But when I hear that they are going to develop these type of features like a duty finder, that kind of stuff or a dungeon finder, that stuff didn't come into WoW until a third expansion. So that's very important to think. And when I start playing a game and they say either A, it's going to be live at launch, or B, it is going to be coming up in the next patch, I think that's fantastic. Now, that does form an opinion, and I understand that. So I just wanted to give you guys my opinions. Yes, I do crafting and stuff like that on the side and these things, and yes, I do PvP, but the majority of what I look at in an MMORPG is first my PvE content, and I wanted to stress that out. And that is just my my experience with them, and let's talk a little bit about the game. And first off, I'm still, in a way, relatively new to the Final Fantasy genre. It is a game series that I grew up with, but most of the games that I played from Final Fantasy was 7 and 9, and 9 is probably currently one of my favorite ones, if it's not an MMORPG. 9 was a big part of my section. So yes, I am in a way new to the Final Fantasy genre, but at the same time, I have tried it, and it has a lot of those things that I love about this series. Now, hopping into the game, I started out, I know in beta, I think I was an Elezen, and then when it went live, at the time I didn't want to be it, so I switched back to human. Eventually, later on, I end up going back to the Elezen once I'd gotten used to it. But I started out as a level 1 human, being the Thaumaturge, working up my way to Black Mage. No real surprise. And it was a little bit to take in at first. It was very confusing for me because of the fact that leveling in this game is a lot different than what I expected. A lot of the games I've played, questing has always been, you start out at level 1, you go from point A to point B leads to point C, which eventually will lead to point D, and so on and so forth. Now, in the beginning, it is a lot like that. You go from point A to point B to C, D. But as you start to progress, you start to understand that leveling isn't just questing. Now, there's other ways you can level. I believe at the time I did discover about leave quests, which are another way to level, and technically are not exactly quests. These are more repeatable quests that you can do every so often. I thought that was a nice touch. I think that was a first thing for me to understand. It was definitely something new, and I thought it was pretty good. I'm not exactly still the huge fan of the cap, but I can understand that if you don't have the cap, it can kind of get out of control. And I also noticed that in this questing system, you have two categories. If you simplify it, You have your main story quest on one side, and you have your side quests on the other side. Side quests can literally be anything. Okay, I lied. I'm sorry. There's 3. I totally forgot about class quests. Class quests are another category of their own, and they always deal with their class. Now, this is something I enjoy when I think of a class quest. I've played Vanilla WoW, and a lot of the different versions of it. In fact, the only one I haven't played is Warlords of Draenor. And I thought it was good. I'm a huge fan of if you're going to unlock this ability, you need to do your class quest. And I'm also a firm believer that if you're going to be getting an ability, it shouldn't be the hardest quest in the world to get your class quest ability. It should be relatively, I would say, moderate difficulty, get it done, and you should be able to get it. And another thing that was new to this was just the fact that everything is tied to the main story. When you're progressing, you have to unlock dungeons, you have to unlock a lot of features just through the main story. I liked it. I believe when I was leveling, I did have a problem with it because I believe at the time they were having issues with the duty finder where you're put in an alternate world, which really kind of hurt my leveling progress because I ended up just having to quest and hoping I didn't get that area where I would be put into a different area, which kind of held me back, but it was still interesting. And I also like the fact that I noticed in these quests that there's a lot more cutscenes involved. And I found myself in this game being a lot more drawn into it. When I've played games like Rift and WoW, I didn't really care about the quests. I just wanted to get from point A to point B to point C. I didn't care what was going on. I didn't read any of the text. As soon as I discovered you could skip the text on that, I'm like, skip the text, get me to point A to point B. And in this game, I was taking my time in reading the text. And also another thing that I totally forgot to mention for some reason, not only when I was playing Final Fantasy, I was still playing WoW. I was still raiding in WoW. I didn't devote maximum time efficiency to Final Fantasy XIV. So it did take me a little bit longer to level, but on my days off that I wasn't raiding on WoW, it was dedicated pretty much to Final Fantasy. But let's talk about those quests. And then you have your side quests that unlock a lot of things. But the main story unlocks a huge majority of your content. It unlocks the dungeons, like I said. It also unlocks your I can't think of the word right now, so I will get back to you on that. It unlocks the leave quests, the guild hests, your retainers. That's the word I was thinking of. I don't know why I forgot it. And I also, on a side note, the retainers I actually liked about your retainers. Now, I'm not going to talk about what they became later, but in the beginning, this person was basically your bank and your auction house for you. That to me was pretty good to be able to not have to run around an entire city, but for one person could handle most of my things. They could also store your money. It was a good feature for me, and they attach these things relatively across the city in various areas. And then the other thing about the quests is the fact that you sort of see yourself developing as a character. As the hero for this world. You are the warrior of light. That's what the quest system says. Now, obviously there was a lot of go here, fetch this, come back. But to me, a real hero, especially even in the game world, is the hero that not only does the extraordinary, but is the one that's willing to go out of his way. And by doing that, your character eventually in the game becomes more well known. You basically make a name for yourself. And then on top of that, going to level 20, I did a lot of those class quests. And I definitely liked the fact that the class quests were very story oriented and they were stories inside of themselves. So when I did my thaumaturgy skills, I was enjoying it. And I was actually intrigued to know what would happen next in the next quest, and I would start to go, what will happen next? And then I did try a little bit of crafting which is going to tie into, of course, my quest conversations. And I even think I might have done a little bit of gathering. And this was the first MMORPG for me that basically the crafting was something I had never handled before. Now, you have to remember here that when I played WoW, it's as simple as you gather ingredients, put it all together, hit the craft as much as you want, and go make a sandwich or something, or just leave your keyboard. This was the first game where it was like you actually need to sit here and craft your item. Now, the other flip side of that too, though, is it was also you still had control of what would happen next. Now, even in game, you still don't have 100% control, but you have a lot more control. And this is also another game where they added two versions of an item. You can get a normal quality, or you can get the high quality with better stats. Now, I played WoW. We all know there's no such thing as high quality there. It's just you craft it, blah, 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 it's done. And I also did discover later on they had quick synthesis, which is similar to the WoW style crafting, but you have a chance to fail and all that. But with the normal quality versus the high quality, when I played Aeon, I totally hated that crafting system because it was completely a luck-based crafting system. You did have the high quality and the normal quality, but you yourself had no control over whether you would get a high quality. Maybe if you had more high quality items, it would work, but it was a game that I didn't like the crafting system, mainly because of the fact that you had no control over your item. And I liked Final Fantasy's version of that because it was more involved. And it was one of those things that you would work harder towards. And of course, eventually I would discover macros to help me with that. And then, of course, we had the gathering. If I did do it, I did remember this once again was a little bit more involved. And I honestly like that about this game is that no matter what you're doing, I feel like you're always progressing your character. Whether it's the crafting you're doing or the gathering, you actually have to put the time into that. It's not as simple as you sit on your keyboard, let it do its actions, and walk away. It's more involved in that. And also the fact that a lot of what you had to do is you had to find out for yourself where everything was. And you would go to those locations and gather those ingredients. It wasn't, I would say, as much as you look on your minimap. That the best part about that is the nodes stay in the same spot. So if you remember where things are, you would go back to them and get those required items and work from there. And I totally forgot about the shard system. I'm not exactly the huge fan, but I understand that it is something there that would be required, and it also is another way to help out the market. Alright, and now since I've talked about the crafting and the questing, let's talk about some of the PvE content. Now, bear in mind, I didn't really unlock my Chocobo mount or anything like that, or of course, the mount itself. So I didn't have either of those. But let's talk about the content. The combat to me felt very WoW-like. I mean, after I played Terra, it definitely gave me a whole different perception. But it's a combat type that I'm still a fan of. It did feel, at first, a little bit slower. But after I played it more and more, I just kind of got used to it. And I still enjoy the combat involved in that. Now, PvE content-wise, for the leveling and stuff, you had dungeons weren't the only method, and neither were the quests. Like I said, we had Guild Hess and all this. Guild Hess, I thought were okay. Being for the person that I am, I felt that Guild Hess were very, how to play this game. Especially, these are very helpful, I think, to a new player who is new to the MMORPG world. I think it's very helpful in making you understand the various situations you will run into. To me, I'm already used to these sort of situations, so it's just like, well, it's bonus XP, why not? but I feel like in the long run for other people they're very helpful. Now the dungeons, for the most part, from of course to the level 20, weren't that bad. I was not used to being level synced before. That was something completely new to me that I had no idea about. And once again, like I said, these dungeons were connected to the story, so you couldn't really advance in the story without doing most of these dungeons. And of course, you unlocked your first dungeon relatively around, I think, 15, which I'm used to. Most games that's being standard. Some games are 10, but 15 is about the average. And I liked the dungeons. I thought the bosses were about the right difficulty for the leveling. The last boss of the first dungeon, I was actually surprised in. It wasn't a very complex boss, but the way the fight felt, I felt like this was a little bit more complicated than what I would see in different MMOs. Was it a complicated fight? No, we one-shotted it, but I thought it was an interesting concept that while you're DPSing the boss, you need to make sure that, oh, there's bubbles up. I need to get to this trapdoor, otherwise we're going to get an ad, and this is just going to get harder. I thought it was a perfect fight. I enjoyed the loot. The loot system I had a little bit of getting used to with the colors, because with WoW, a lot of MMOs copy that color system. And this was the first one where there wasn't a such thing as a gray. It's white, pink, green, and then blue, and then for your relics, of course, being purple. That was something different. And it took a lot of getting used to. Obviously, I didn't see these blues, but I later discovered about them. And the other thing that I loved about, unfortunately, in the beginning, I didn't think that this was a shared party ability. I thought this was a single party ability, which I later on discovered not to use again, but limit break. And if you play Final Fantasy games, typically at one point or another, you've heard about a limit break. And I love limit breaks. I love them in this game. Why? Because I'm a big fan of, in the MMORPG world now, where you have these big skills. Now, in WoW, that version would basically be like a heroism. But I liked in Final Fantasy that if you're a caster, you do like an AoE. And if you're melee, you do a big single target spell. I loved the limit breaks. I still like them. And I'm looking forward, of course, to the limit breaks in the expansion. I'm just a fan of building up to a huge spell. And that's what a limit break was. You build up to it, and then you unleash it. And, of course, the other thing that I liked was the hunting logs. It was not only a good way of XP, this was also something that would let you explore the world. And I cannot talk about this game without not talking about the world. The one thing I had to get used to was more loading screens than usual. Like in WoW, typically you only get it at a dungeon, but going from zone to zone had loading screens. That was something I wasn't used to. At this point, I'm really over it. If you have good internet and a system that loads it relatively fast, you barely even notice the loading screens. And being that I played in the MMORPG world, you got to get used to loading screens. It's just these were more than usual. But I liked most of the zones. I liked the look of them. And even to this day, I usually find these zones that I just walk by and I just have to sit for a second and just look at it and be like, this is beautiful. And especially when this game teases new updates about new areas, I'm like, tell me more, please. And that leads to my next subject, which at this point I would say is talking about I guess you could say the community / the developers in this game. And when I started playing this game, I heard about live letters, and I'm like, well, what's a live letter? And for anyone that doesn't know, I'm going to describe this to the best of my ability. Now, we know about in WoW and stuff like that the information, for the most part, isn't really thrown at you. I understand, like, right before a big patch comes, Blizzard will be like, well, here's what's going to happen. And that's really what a live letter was. But I felt like it was more community-based. Now, granted, in mind that this is from Square Enix, and this is coming from the Final Fantasy XIV development team based in Japan. I don't speak that much Japanese. Honestly, I wouldn't even say that I can understand 99.9% of Japanese. I understand simple words, not even enough to make a conversation here. But while they are in Japanese, that we do have a strong community that is willing to translate that. And there has been, at certain times, actual English live letters. But I love these live letters because it's where the developers meet and talk to you and be like, this is what we are doing right now, and this is what you can expect in the future. And at the same time, they also do these huge events where they're asking the community questions, and they want you to ask questions, and depending on what you ask and the overflow, you might get a question answered, and they tease us with information, and I honestly love that. And I always look forward to every live letter we get. Now, I think I may have only saw one, or maybe it was later on, but it was definitely something I had to bring up about this game. And the other section of that is they get. Obviously didn't get this when I started playing, but it came later, and they have what they call veteran rewards. And I played Aeon before, and this is very similar from Aeon. It might have even been called Veteran Rewards. I can't remember. But Veteran Rewards is basically just little things that the people that you get in-game that basically says, I've been subbed for so many months. And I don't ever expect like something that has to go tremendous and out of the way for the developers, but it's nice to know that it's a little thank you to say thank you for subbing to the game. And let's see, that's about all of what I had to talk about. The other part of that too is, being that I was level 20, I also faced my first primal Ifrit, and honestly I enjoyed fighting that primal fight. It did feel like, I wouldn't say like a raid, but it felt like sort of an epic boss fight. It was relatively simple, and of course with this being, it was a story primal, and I learned later on that it was about to get much harder. I think the first time I tried it I wiped, and then we caught on real quickly, and then we killed it, of course. And that's all I have to say about my pre-thoughts. And I was going to rate these things, so I'm probably just going to come up with some ratings in my head and then give. It's not going to be average calculated. I'm just going to give you sort of my thoughts on it. And bear in mind that, if I'm correct here, PvP never became a thing till I was after 50, and even then the lowest Q was 35, so I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to tell you, though, I am making an Afterthoughts video, and expect that Afterthoughts roughly about the same time that Heavensward is about to start. And I am going to make a pre-thoughts of Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward 2 weeks after it starts. Yes, I know the Alexander raid is coming about 2 weeks after it starts. I'm still going to make the video. I'll probably make other videos to update my opinions on this. And I also, in the comments below, want you guys to express your opinions about this game, as well as what do you agree with me, what do you disagree, all of that stuff. So let's go into what I'm going to do. Now, with quests, I would say about a 6. That's, I would say, because there's definitely a lot of fetch quests which do turn away my opinion about the quest, but I definitely like the story involved in them, and it's just a general rating. Next, we have the crafting. I'm giving the crafting a 7 out of 10, mainly because of the fact that it is really something I feel is unique. Well, crafting is not unique, but it's very unique, and that it's actually rewarding for the time you invest into it. At the same time, there's always room for improvement, of course, on that end. Gathering, I would say about a 6, just because gathering is always the more, I feel like the more work involved, especially when you are playing. And at the time, I didn't really have a whole lot of thoughts on that. The next part, I guess, would be the PvE, and being that I only played to 20, it's a little bit hard not to come up with like the rating, but I'm gonna have to say at the time about a 7 out of 10. Actually, let's make that an 8 out of 10. I'm sorry. The 8 out of 10, just because I did get that taste of the dungeons. Now, there's a lot of parts that I don't like about it when leveling, the guild has and all that, but the primal battle in the dungeons I felt were worth it at a time. And the community, I would honestly give it, I want to say a 9, just because for the most part, I didn't have a whole lot of negative experiences in the beginning. I did have, it wasn't a very trolly community, and it's not really, in the beginning, it wasn't really a hateful community. And I count that towards, of course, the live letters, which is, I thought was something that they're reaching out to the players. And that just leaves me, I didn't talk a whole lot about the other classes just because when I was originally playing, for the most part, it was tunnel vision about getting that thaumaturge to level 20. Oh, I totally forgot to talk about the looks of this game, besides the world. How could I forget that? When I started playing, I liked the customization I got out of it. And being that customization, I would say graphically for this game is a 9 out of 10 for me. I think it's just about the right amount of graphics. I don't usually want to say a 10 out of 10 because there's always room for improvement. So moving back to what I was talking, there was something else I wanted to say, but I think that's about it, and that really just leaves with my final rating for the game when I was starting out at level 20. I would say when I was that 1 to 20, I would say a 7 out of 10, because I hadn't gotten a full taste of what brought me into this game, but at the time it was a good game. And bear in mind, like I said, when I was playing this, I had to play WoW at the same time, and I was raiding at the same time, and I was playing this game on the side, and I still hadn't said this is the game I'm gonna play. So that is my final rating for that, and we're going to end the video there. I'm sorry that this is such a long video. I'm definitely going to be putting in, of course, a bunch of annotations to link you out the video. If there's a particular part you want to hear, it will be there for you. And I just wanted to say, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment down below. I definitely want to hear your guys' opinion. Do you agree with my ratings? I understand that this was a little jumpy in the video. Unfortunately, that's how my brain thinks. No matter if I write a script or anything, I jump around all the time because that's how my brain works. Subscribe to stay updated to my channel, and of course, always expect more videos to come from me. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.